So would you want to go ahead and read the description?
Please, I ask you to do the heavy speaking, so because
Okay, that's fine.
my
Oh,
voice could be choppy because of it.
okay. So the description for this says, make a function that looks through a list and take the first argument and returns an array of all objects that have equivalent property values coming from the second argument. And that is all the information we get for this. Um, every time I do a
Yeah.
challenge, I like to run the code first and see what kind of results we're looking for. So if we look here, this would be the first argument, and this is what we can expect to get passed in. Then this is the second argument.
Yeah, we also can see that that could be more than one value.
Correct.
So in this case, we have A and B, and no, not just as it is on the
Yeah,
input.
we can also get integers and not just names. We can compare these the same though. A triple equal sign um, should should work for either an integer or a string, but we do have to take notice this one does have two of them, whereas this one we're only going to have, actually this will have two as well. So we need to make sure both keys from the object are equal. So Chris, what do you think we should do to get started? What would be our first step?
Well, I think our first step should be go straight away to fill the the collection, and inside of we could uh, a map or maybe another uh, for E in the source object.
Okay, it was a little hard to understand you there. Um, but what we should do, I think, is we're gonna have to loop through the first argument
That's
and
right.
and check it with all the source arguments. So I'm more partial to using this.
I wouldn't do a loop. I would. I was thinking of mapping through the collection.
Okay, okay, that's good.
So
A good way to do it too. You want to show? You want to show your thought process and start typing?
sure, yeah, I will do first. Well, I will define maybe more variables so it's more clear
Okay,
rather than just chaining stuff.
okay, that's
So
good. And to keep in mind, it's always very good to name your variables as close to what they are as you can get them. That way, later on, as you go through the program,
yeah,
or if you're doing a bigger size program, if you ever have to go back to visit your code, it's easier to understand what you were doing. Or if you have to share code, like we are doing now, we both understand what the different variables do and are. Now, our two variables that are getting passed in their objects. You can see this by the curly bracket. A curly bracket signifies an object. So if you look down here, this is an object here. Now it's being passed inside of an array. So from this square bracket, which signifies an array, all the way down to this square bracket, that's an entire array. Now inside each of this array, for each element, we have an object by the curly brackets. So we can see we have one, two, three elements in this array. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I can see that. Well, now we have an array with the keys that will be our filter for our source collection, for our collection already.
Okay, and
And
now
now we can do a fill. Sure, go on.
I was gonna say here he used you can use object.keys on any kind of object, and this will return an array of keys that are in there. And for here, the keys, say for this one here, which he called on source, it only has one key in it, and that's last. So he's going to get an array
Yeah,
with just the string last. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Now, was thinking of filtering the collection array, since it's an array with objects, and we should put that in a result that will be our sorry if I use this syntax. Is this just a persons or no? This is just objects. I won't call it person. And now that we're filtering, we have to apply a parameter. So we either pass the object to the result or filter it.
Okay. And now what he's doing here, he's calling filter on collection. And with filter, you can run some sort of function inside of it. And what it's going to do, it's almost the same thing as a for loop. It's going to take turns and pass each element of the array, which is this object, through it one at a time. And it's going to return true or false. If it's true, it keeps it and it's going to store it in the result. If it's false, it's going to discard it and we're not going to need it or use it. So object is going to be this object here.
Yeah. And now we have to run through our source keys and compare them to what's inside the object to see if there are both, not both, but the same number of keys and all are the same both in the target and in the source. So we have to make an iteration again, and that could be made with a for each maybe or with a for in loop. I always prefer the iterators, so in this case I will do a source keys and
Okay, so we want to iterate.
filtering. Okay, yeah, so filter of the object. Okay, so filter.
Okay, so we're going to iterate through all the source keys because if we look
Yeah,
on the left, we can have multiple source keys. We can have A or we can have B, as seen in one of our other tests. So we need to make sure we can't just call element 0 or to get the first key and expect it to be correct. We need to take into account there can be multiple keys.
I will define a variable that will act as a return value. I will call it maybe pass. I will call it pass. I don't know if there's a more expressive name for this. It's just a storage for a value that starts as undefined, which is falsy, and
Okay, so
no, this should start as true, and if I find that any of the source keys doesn't correlate to our object, I will set it to false.
okay. So we want to double check, make sure all our source keys are existent in the collection. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So in this case, we have our source. Now, if
And now remember,
for each, no, yeah, I'm missing
yeah. Okay. Now we want to remember this object variable, it does get passed through, we can access it from inside the source keys function.
Yeah, I know. So if source,
We can call it just by keys, right? Okay, go ahead.
we know we have the key, but we have to compare against the values. So I'm using source key, and if this doesn't equal to our object key, then we set pass to false. And this should be our filter. And that should filter, I think that should be it. Can you spot any error?
Well, let's just run it and then we can debug it from there.
Yeah.
So if we run the code, we get nothing.
Yeah,
nothing is passed back at all.
The filter. Okay, we passed it. We passed the. Okay, each object, and passing is set to true, but for each key in source keys, if our source, which will be available, doesn't equal to our object with the same key, set pass to false.
I don't think we, right here.
Yeah, that should be returned pass, or otherwise it will always be false.
Right. So now let's see what happens if we run it. We still, nothing happens.
But still an empty.
So let's see. Result function. Oh, I think I might have put this too high up. No.
Source, no, it's alright. Source keys for each function key is source.
I feel like we're not returning. I feel like we're not returning something here. Let's see.
Yeah, I think that we have to return. No, this is just only the for each, so it's higher up. It should be down there. Yeah.
Okay. Now before we go on, let's go back and go over everything again. That way we can clear up.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do, this one we don't need. We need to get all the keys in our source. That way so we can compare them. So we need to going through our object, we need to use object.keys, and this will pull all the keys out. So last, it'll get us last, and say we had something else like something, it would give us last and animal. But that way, that's what object keys does. It pulls all the keys out of the object we pass through it. So now we want to take our collection and we want to go through it. That's what filters lets it do. What filter does is it'll iterate through every element in whatever you pass through to it and return, if it's true, it'll return that into whatever variable you have it assigned. So this collection will go through and it'll start here, and it says we're using a flag here. Now we're going to get past this, and this is going to go through into our source keys. It says, hey, does last, the key, equal the last key here? So it's saying, does Monagu equal capital at. And if it does, it's good. It goes through, and since this is set to true, it'll return it. However, if it doesn't, if it's false, pass gets changed to false, and this fails. So then our object does not get stored in our result. And this will loop through every single element in our array and compare it and make sure all the things are here. It does the same thing for our other test case, and this is our method that lets us have multiple keys in the source file. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say on that on the
I think
subject?
it's pretty. No, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it could be done maybe shorter if we just return false instead of setting the flag, and that should save us maybe 2 lines of code, which I don't think is relevant, and it's maybe better to be readable by setting explicitly what we're testing against and what we do when we find a case that we don't like.
Right. So what he's saying is we can remove this if at any time we reach a false in our thing, we know it fails. So without a doubt, we can fail it.
But that will only I don't think if that will only return false for the forage. No, forage shouldn't be expecting a return. No, it doesn't expect a return, so that won't work either.
Yeah, it didn't
We
like that
need to
because
yeah, but
it's what the reason that didn't work is because it checks this one and then it fails and it's returning too soon.
yeah, but I think that the iteration can be broken if we.
I
But
believe
that,
using a
that
flag is the best way to go about it
yeah,
because that way I think it might be more readable and you can help understand it. I think I always like to use flags. You can shorten it down, but shorter code does not always mean cleaner or more readable code. So some people like to take shortcuts and kind of smash it down as small as you want. They can. That's not always the best way. Okay, so let's go check out the next bonfire.
okay. Let's go to the next one.
Oh, I've already completed this one. So
Hey, Kashrai.
I have
No, this one, no, please. Hey,
I have a list of them all open over here. Let me find it.
yeah.
Okay, and the next one in the series is called Seek and Destroy. What this one is asking us to do is remove all variables from the last argument from an array, the first argument, and return as a new array. So what it wants us to do is go through this array we get and remove it. So it'd be like 1, okay, that passes, add that to the new array. Then we get to 2, oh, 2 matches here, get rid of it. Now we go to the next array. 3, oh, 3 matches one of our arguments, get rid of it. 1, let's add 1. 2 and 3 don't. So this would be what we're looking forward to do. So like I said before, we always want to run it and see what kind of values it's expecting or what other arguments we might be looking to get. Because you never know when they're going to throw a curveball and you might have to take something into consideration. So now that we know,
Yeah, and adding features is it's harder than doing them right from the start.
yeah, so I always feel it's a good way to just go through and check. So if you notice, 1 argument, 2 argument, 3 arguments, but we only have 1 argument up here.
Yeah, but in this case, it could be. I think that the tests, no, they can. they can pass. Yeah, they are passing uh, only two arguments, I think. But the purpose of this should be being able to handle an undefined number of arguments.
Yeah, we take as many arguments as possible. So JavaScript has a nice little, I believe it's called like a global variable arguments. This is the same thing as these. So when you have like R, R2, R3, but you don't know how many there are. If you use arguments, it's an array of all the arguments passed to that method. So this lets
Yeah,
you,
well, it's not an array, but an array-like object. That is good to have clear, since you can apply the most of methods that an array has to the arguments.
okay, but we know the first one is going to be of an array of numbers that we're going to need to use. So can you think of a good name to call this?
We can name it collection, maybe. It's kind of
Okay,
not too
so
creative, but I think
we know the first index 0 is always going to be the array of numbers that we're going to remove from. So this is what we're going to prune away from. So we're going to check if 2 is in here, 3 is in here, and then the rest we can iterate through. So we're going to want to create a return array. We can get rid of these.
but yeah, but how are you going to get the rest of the arguments?
Well, the good thing about this, called arguments, we can iterate over it. So if we do something like so what this lets us do, no matter how many elements are passed through to our function, we will be able to handle that because we're going to iterate over the rest of them. So we can have as little as none. We can only have our main array, which would defeat the purpose of this function, or we could have up to like 10,000 million, whatever number you want to use it as. And now somebody in the chat just pointed
Okay.
out we can use shift to get just the first argument of the array, and that's very correct. I don't like to modify this itself.
No, you can you can use you can use shift, because argument is not an array. You can make a copy of the argument subject and put it into an array using slice, for example, and that would be another method to do it. But first, let's go to this one using for loop, since it's also the faster one if you benchmark it, and so it's not wrong to do it this way.
Okay. But do take into notice somebody is saying we can just shift the first element off. And I would suggest everybody who's not completely familiar with JavaScript to go over to the MDN over here, and all the methods you could think of that exist inside JavaScript you can find here. So like somebody said, shift is used on an array, so we can see it here. We can go through and read what this does, how it works. We can see some examples of it in use. So if you're just starting out to JavaScript, I would highly suggest going over to the MDN. You can find it by just typing in MDN JavaScript into Google, and then just go over and read some of these just to understand what they do and how they work. Okay, so now back to here.
Well, let's go. Yeah, back to the exercise.
Okay, so now we got control over the rest of the arguments, and we're going to loop through them. So what we want to do is we want to compare if this equals anything in here. Now, how would we do that? I I suggest using another array. Now we want to do collection dot length. And now with this for loop, we'll do let's just kind of line break this. Okay. So now we can compare
Okay.
them. So if collection y does not equal, this could lead us
Okay.
into a problem because we can get, okay, let's use a
And what's the flag for?
in case we
Remember
don't.
that
Okay, you're right. I felt like we were gonna get multiple successions. So if collection does not equal arguments, and arguments is x, we want to take
yeah.
our return array and push our collection. Does that look right to you?
Yeah, that looks correct to me. Let's push collection in. Yeah, yeah.
Arguments. So I spelled arguments wrong.
Where it's not
Okay.
defined. Argument. It's just a typo.
So that did not work. What am I doing wrong here? Let's go back and look.
Let's check. The certificate. You. Yeah.
Maybe I
The
think
answer. I think no. It's not.
maybe I might have my loops backwards. Maybe we should loop through the collection.
Okay. X1.
Yeah, let's loop through the
Argument
collection.
X response. Right.
No.
Let me check. Since
Yeah,
you turned everything backwards, I got kind of lost about what you did.
I
Yeah.
flipped it around.
So you're starting to loop. Yeah, over the collection, which is argument 0. That's okay. Then I wait for this last. Okay. Then 4 x starting from 1 and arguments to then x plus the if collection y, which is okay, is different. Even through no this.
I feel like we should use the flag like I was doing before.
No, yeah, because this way you will be passing the value multiple times if it's not the same as the arguments. And after you loop through all of them, if the flags is true, you add them. I understand now what you're doing.
Okay. Okay, it still does not like that.
The but
Let's be.
if as mm,
Yeah, I'm just out. I'm just out of.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay. So
okay.
let's go over that because
But
I did a lot of things right there.
I won't lie to you. I'm not big fan of nested for loops. I think there's I like more the functional style where you chain map and for each and map chain iterators instead of doing for loops, because I think as every time you add something inside a loop, you add complexity on how to read it. So you have a for, then an if,
Okay.
and at that point, I already starting to go to each iteration to understand what's happening.
Okay. You do have a good point. So let's go over and do it again, but this time we'll use only functional programming.
Yeah, okay. But also, uh,
Yes.
yeah, also, when you work with the arguments, uh, it's often recommended that you do, as someone in the chat said, that that first you make a clone of the arguments, so you don't touch the values, as arrays and objects are passed by reference, or not you could be ending modifying the arguments, and you don't want that. So you could say something like new arguments.
Okay. Yeah. I agree to assign it to the new variable.
And this should be central elements. I think this should be. I think I have the right syntax. Let me check with our public page posted, something like that.
We can always.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So now we have a clone of our arguments, and now we can do what they said, which is shifting the first parameter, the first value of that array. Now that we have a proper array, and we can say that is new arguments that shift. Okay, now we have all of our values in new arguments and our target array in collection.
Correct. And now, do you want to demonstrate how you would use? You could either use map or filter.
Sure, in this case, now we have almost the same as the first exercise, but only is simpler because we don't have to search inside of the objects. We have an array right away, which is new arguments. And we can do filter.
And now remember what filter does. If it gets inside filter gets returned true, it passes it back and saves it to our new variable.
Yeah.
Or if it's false, it discards it.
So, and now we will save time, since we will be returning an array from this, and we don't need an additional variable for our result. So we're going to just return what we get from filtering the original array.
Correct. Like last time we
And
did.
in this case,
Last time what we did is we saved it to a variable, and then we just return that variable. What he's saying now is we can just shorten it and return the result directly, because new arguments.filter will pass back the result.
Okay, and now what I'm doing as a filtering function is that we search new arguments, which is our filtering numbers array, and if we find the number, we should be it's if we don't find it, we pass it as true. But if it's 0 or greater than 0 in the array, we don't return it.
Okay, so what index of does is it's like sort of like a contains function. It says, hey, if this exists in here, return the index of it. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you would search for, say, 2, it's going to return the first time it runs into 2. So it would return 1. However, if we searched here, it said 5, and we searched, say, like this, so this dot index of 5, it would return -1 because it did not find the 5 in here, so it has no index. So -1. So if it's less than 0, it has to be -1. And since he's comparing it like this,
I wish that values less than 0 were treated as falsy, as I'm used to in C, but in this case, only 0 is treated as false, but less than 0, -1 is treated as true. So you have to add the conditional that is less than 0 and not just the value as you will do in some other language. Okay, that's good. And it says, no, what happened?
You didn't return anything, so let's see. Filter.
Yeah, no,
Function I.
the arguments, index of, or is it if B high? No, it's collection. I missed the parameter name.
Okay, now
it should pass.
Before you click on that, let's just. So what we're doing is we're calling on collection.
1 second, please.
Sure. So we're calling on collection. We're saying filter everything that does not equal this. And what this is checking, it's checking if I here is inside of new arguments. If it is, return true and return that number. So it checks. Is 1 in here? No. Is 2 in there? Well, backwards from what I was saying. Is 2 in here? Yes. So don't return it.
Okay, so you have any comments? I see that doing it this way is kind of cleaner than doing it the other way.
Yeah, it is a little cleaner. Filter and map are probably the better way to go. I'm just used to using like more things like Java and C++. Well, yeah, C++, where you don't have. Well, I don't use a filter. I never used a filter before until I got to JavaScript. Okay, so the next one is going to be, where do I belong? Okay. And now what this is going to do, return the lowest index at which a value, the second argument, should be inserted into an array, the first argument. So pretty much what it's asking, where do I put this number inside this array so it fits? So remember, your index starts with 0, so it would be 0, 1, Now you want to put this before the 60 because 40, 50, 60 is the order. So it should be 1. And now these are our test cases and what is expected of us. So 30.
Yeah, in this case, yeah, and it's 2. Okay, yeah.
Yep,
No, it is 2. Yeah, so
that's
in this
correct.
case, if the 34 is 0, 1, 2, 3, yeah, it's a okay.
Yeah, because that should be the new variable because 40 should get pushed up. Okay?
Yeah, it's the index that will the new variable will occupy on the new array.
Okay. So,
So how should we go about this? Or
um,
what are your thoughts about this? I'm always thinking about using some of the principal iterators which are for each map, reduce, and filter. If I don't find a way to do it using that ones, I switch to other methods.
okay.
But I think that this will be made with only one for each and one storage for the index.
So you're suggesting we do use a for loop?
No, in this case, it it could be better using a for loop since using one of the iterators means you're kind of trying out to go over all of the collection. But if we start from the first element, we only have to go to the element that interests us. So if it's the first one, there's no need to go through all of the array to seek for the corresponding index that we are trying to insert the value. So I think this is better if we make it using the for loop.
Okay. So, okay, so if our number is less than
Mm, if yeah, well, you only need one return value, I think.
well, in case say our number is 70, then it's not gonna return anything. It'll just crash.
I don't think it's asking for
So like that, I
yeah,
fail. Okay, so this fails.
uh,
So 30 equal 2.
and it's equaling 3. Yeah, it's maybe it's if it's less or equal than.
Okay.
Yeah,
So all we're doing is we're looping through our array and we're checking. Is 50 less than 40? No. Bump the index up by 1 and check again. Is 50 less than 60? Yes. So since we're at index 1, that should be 50's new home at index 1. And everything else should get shifted back.
yeah. Well, in the chat, Megadeth is telling us to use for each instead of for loop. Once again,
Okay?
the native methods for mapping and filtering, contrary to what one might think, are very slow, like 100 times or 1,000 times slower than doing a for loop.
Okay.
So for very simple things, it is better to use a for loop than using for each or another kind of
I also
iterator, unless you, yeah.
want to point out, if you use a for each, you're going to need some sort of counter as well. So then you're going to need to add something like var x before your for each, and then increment it every time you loop through. Because here, I'm using that iterator to help me keep track of where our indexes are. With a for each, I don't get this variable, so I'd have to create it myself and use it by incrementing it and setting it to 0 in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, so we can move to the next one. This one was very easy.
Okay, this one is where do I belong? So the next one is sum all numbers in a range. Okay. So now this is saying we'll pass you an array of two numbers. Return the sum of those two numbers and all numbers in between them. The lowest number will not always come first. So right there, that is one thing we need to always check. We need to make sure we have the lowest number in the constant same spot. So we're going to have to declare our two variables, and I say we set the lowest one to variable lowest with a conditional statement, and the highest variable highest.
I think I did this one with maybe can I try an
Sure.
approach?
Sure, go ahead.
I think I've done this one like 1,000 times with since, but one of the methods I don't see often is using the just for loop, but for a range which could be scrambled, and we could have 4 first and 1 second. We can use math. We can get the minimum value from our array, and no, I have to define a variable. Then use as our limiter the max value from our array. And of course, we need an accumulator, which is
Okay, and right here,
and
you're gonna want to change this.
yeah, I so you still need to yeah, it should be X.
Okay, and just okay.
Okay, then X is equal X. And run it. Wait, what? 0, 0, 0. The number from plus equal math multiply R, math multiply R, and from all. Let me see what I'm doing wrong here.
Well, I think now would be a great time to pull up the MDN. And let's look up math.
I know what happened.
Okay.
It's I'm missing a parameter here.
Okay.
I just remember. Apply takes a context parameter first, and since we don't need it, we can pass null and array.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
Okay,
good.
now
Yeah,
what he's doing here is normally you would do a conditional if R0 is bigger than R1, then you would set R1 to the highest, else you would set R0 to the highest, and vice versa, R0 to the lowest and R1 to the lowest. However, he's using a nifty little function here, math.min, and he's applying it to arguments, the array, and it's returning the lowest number in the array. And since we only have two numbers and we're going from our lowest number to our highest number, this works beautifully. So he's saying start at the lowest and go all the way to the highest. Note, he's using less than or equal to because we want to go up and include that number. And then he's using just a standard iterator. Then this is his sum value, which he's adding everything to. And all he's doing is using plus equals, which is the same as this, just shorthand. And he returns it at the end.
yeah. Well, that was the one method I found to be very readable and short. Maybe you want to try another one?
I would have done it just the same way, except I wasn't aware of this method right here. So the only thing I would have done differently is we know there's only two variables. So I would have said like if argument 0 is bigger than this, I would have said and then change these to opposites. And I would have used small here and big here. But I believe what you use is an excellent use of that function.
Yeah, well, I also done it before using, instead of this, uh, using R sort.
That's a good way to do it too.
Well, in this case, I'm modifying the array argument, but for this kind of exercise, it's just okay. And so we sort first the array, and then we can use just R0 and R1 as our range.
Good, because yeah, it automatically sorts it by values.
That's another way,
These are two very good ways to do it too.
which is also valid. Yeah, and of course we could also cheat, so to say, and use lambda.
Yes, because we do have access globally to it.
Yeah. To and now I think this will work. No.
You're getting no.
Uh,
Are you returning it right? Oh yeah.
yeah, but is sort R byte of function
You're missing something here.
Function. Function.
Or here, do you need a
I'm
semicolon here?
missing. I did it all wrong. It should be. Ah,
Fight,
the,
fighting with the
I
keyboard
tried
here.
to write too fast. Yeah, it's just the same sort function. No, I think I'm not using
Yeah, you're.
the right.
We'll space this out here. Just.
It's range. So let me check the random documentation. Maybe it doesn't even match. So if function. Okay, so
Do you need
we'll
this?
sort first, and then we have a range.
Now this you don't really have
I
to
think
know if
it's
you're watching in chat. This is kind of more of a extra thing. There's something called a library called Rhonda, and the site uses it. So it is available to the bonfires. You don't need it at all to complete any of the bonfires. You can complete many of the bonfires using it, but you don't need it at all.
I think the problem is yeah. Yeah, I need to fork here because I'm range takes a list of values, not an array. So in this case, let me check how do I convert from an array to a list. Is it a fork?
Okay, Quincy said in chat, whenever we're
Well,
ready to pass it over, we can pass it over to him.
well, I think already you were just trying to use Randa for an extra okay, function composition, but we can leave it here. I will try to get it and post it a bit later. Is I'm just missing the way for turning an array into two discrete values. Will sort of make. I think it's apply. Yeah, it's apply, but okay, we can leave it here.
Okay.
It's yeah.
I just want to remind everyone in chat, always check out the Gitter. There's a lot of people willing to help you out in there. Um, there's also a chat room for pair programming. So if you ever want to pair up with somebody, if you just post in there and post what you want to do, say bonfires for example, there's always people looking to match up with you. You can learn new things like how we learn math.min to easily sort the uh, sort the array. But yeah, my name's Mr. Renter, and I'm with Chris, and I hope you enjoyed our stream tonight. Do you have anything to say, Chris?
Well, thank you to everyone that's watching. I'm having a very nice time. First time I'm streaming, and sorry if you can't understand my English. It's not the best one, but I think I did my best.
Alright, so everybody have a good night. I'm gonna hand it over to Quincy now.